Welcome to the Three Championship Drive on YouTube, hosted by me, Lance Caporossi. Follow me on X at Lance Caporossi and check out the Three Championship Drive podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and do me a favor, tell a Pistons fan. The Detroit Lions had the best season I have witnessed in my life. NFC Championship game, lose by 3 to the 49ers. It's just I hate that it's over, but when I was a kid growing up, the joke about the Detroit Lions was you watch the Detroit Lions for the team that they're playing. That was always the joke. So to finally have that monkey off the back as a fan and finally being able to witness an incredible season and actually get a taste of success is the greatest feeling. I never want it to end. It's like I am bummed out that they lost, but I only expected one playoff win, and we got two. It was an incredible season. What a ride. I'll I'll never forget it. I'll never forget this season, and I really hope they retool, they get some more help on the defensive line, they get some help in the secondary, and I feel like they will. I feel like there's gonna be some players that wanna come to Detroit. I feel like they're gonna make that blockbuster trade next season to bring in that player that's going to help them get over the top. And I'm not going to predict going to the promised land, but I am expecting like another NFC championship game for the Detroit Lions. Just an incredible season. It was amazing. So earlier in the week, I was asked two questions. One I'm going to start the podcast with, and then the other one I'm going to end the podcast with. So this came from a friend of mine. We were just sitting there, we were talking, and the question he asked me was, why did the Pistons move on from Marvin Bagley when it doesn't seem like the Pistons will make another move? And I had a little I thought about it for a little bit, and really that whole trade was just about saving money, and getting out of Marvin Bagley's contract. So the Detroit Pistons, they're projected to have 64 million in cap space this offseason after trading Marvin Bagley. And look, Monty wasn't playing Marvin Bagley. He The last time he played 20 or more minutes was back in December when he played 30 and he finished the game against the Jazz with 22 points and 5 rebounds. There was just really no future for him on this team. I mean, he is as classic as a big man in today's NBA as there is. There's no range to his game. He's very good on the block. He has a great touch around the rim. He's thriving with the Washington Wizards right now, even though, they're still losing games. I always thought the thing with Marvin Bagley was there's just that one skill that was missing from putting him over the top, but he's always going to have a role on a team. It's not going to be a starter. He's not going to move the win. He's not going to move the needle in the win column that much, but I mean, when you give him the minutes, he can produce. I always thought he was more valuable in 22 minutes or less because he could still go out there and get you a bucket and get you rebounds. And he was a nice lob threat for Cade and Jaden Ivey. That was the nice thing. But trading Marvin Bagley, I should say, for Danilo Gallinari and Mike Muscala, in my opinion, I really felt like even though it was a minor trade and it was really about just moving the money, I I really think it was about trying to change the way the Pistons played because now you have two floor spacers at that 4 and 5, primarily the 5 position. Because who are we kidding? Danilo, he's not really playing the 4 anymore in today's NBA unless that knee heals up. But it was really about changing the way they played. You put more floor spacers out on the floor for Cade, Jaden Ivey, even Asar Thompson, giving them space to develop and do the things they do well, which is, you know, playing basketball in space. That's what they did. And I just don't know if I'm not counting the Pistons out from making another trade because they definitely have the cap space to do it. I'm going to talk about a few trades here on the podcast. I just lean that nothing else will happen this season. I don't really expect a blockbuster trade to happen. I don't know what they're going to do in free agency because I'm looking at the 2024 class. There's some names in there, but they're not really like the sexiest names. They're not going to move, they're not going to get you more W's in the win column. I do think they're good veterans that could help out and make this more of like a competitive roster. But again, that's the offseason. And like I said, I just don't see them really making any other moves. And the reason I don't think they'll make other moves is I really think the Pistons will look in a different direction for a GM, and they're just trying to keep this roster intact, keep the assets on the team so the next GM can make the moves and actually build a competitive roster. But just to recap, Marvin Bagley traded was to save money. He had no future in Detroit. And Danilo Gallinari and Mike Muscala, they allow you to play a different brand of basketball in space. That's what that trade was about, at least in my opinion. So the Pistons, are they really looking to trade Alec Burks and Bojan? So James Edwards, he dropped a piece from The Athletic earlier this week, and he said the Pistons aren't actively looking to trade Alec Burks or Bojan. And I don't get what the Pistons are doing because neither of these two are a part of the Pistons' future unless the future is next season and they're going to be more competitive. I don't know what the reluctance is on not trading Alec Burks. I believe he's in his final year of a contract, and that's a guy I just don't see re-signing with this team because his skill set and what he brings to a team off the bench is so valuable, especially to a contender. And I feel like there are going to be contenders that are going to go after him. And, he might get a little pay bump when he signs with a new team. I just don't see it in Detroit. So that's why I'm wondering, why are you holding on to him? Why are you not actively trying to shop him right now when he's been playing so well for the Pistons for the last month? I mean, he's been on a heater for a while now. He had a 34-point game against the Wizards a few games ago that resulted in a win. So I'm just not sure why you're trying to hold on to these two guys. Like if the Pistons were in a better position, I would understand it a little bit more. But we're talking about Boyan, who's 34, that will be 35 at the end of this season. And I just don't know if he keeps up the production. So I really felt like the time to trade Boyan was last season before he reached 34 when there were a lot of contenders. It seemed like we're calling about him. He seemed to be in the trade rumors every week. So I just don't understand what the Pistons and Troy Weaver are trying to do. I think what Troy Weaver is thinking is like, look, in this offseason, I have 64 million to spend. I can build a competitive roster, a team that's going to be better than it is this year, which should not be hard to do. Let me make that clear. Like this team is bad. And just adding a few more NBA players should do the trick to get you more than 6 wins on the season up to this point. So I think he's thinking like I'm going to build a competitive roster, and when the roster is better, these two guys will help out and make us better with their skill sets. But again, I'm not really buying it. I think these are pieces that the window is really closing on both of them because, like I said, Alec Burks, I believe he will be a free agent at the end of this season. And Boyan, he'll be 35 next year. I just don't know how much he has left in the tank. Like that window to get rid of these guys and to get something back in value, that window is closing. You got to make a move at some point. And like I've been saying already twice, I just don't think Troy Weaver does it. And maybe it really does come down to they like Tom Gores and the other people in the front office, Troy Weaver's boss are just telling him like, look, we're not going to let you make any more moves. They're going to be minor. We're not going to let you trade these guys because I don't know. It's just we just don't trust you. Maybe that's what the conversation is. I have no clue. I don't have an ear inside that office. So the Detroit Pistons appear to be willing to part ways with Boyan ahead of the deadline. So it's kind of weird how we're getting how it's a little conflicting, like, they're not actively shopping him, but at the same time, they're willing to part ways with him, so I'm a little confused by that. Like, are you just waiting for a great trade to come in order for you to trade Boyan, but at the same time, you're not really looking to trade him? I'm a little confused by that. But this also comes from James Edwards. He says the Pistons asking price for Boyan is a good first round pick and a good player. So I don't know if he means like if I'm trading Boyan, I want a first round pick and a good player, or he's saying it has to be one or the other. It has to be a good player, or it has to be a good first round pick that either I'm going to be able to draft a player with it, like close to the lottery, or I'm going to be able to flip it for another piece. I just don't know what that is. I don't believe the Pistons actually want to trade Boyan because let's be honest, he's a fantastic player. He's still averaging 20 points per game this year. And like I've already said, he's going to be 35 before the end of the season. His clock is ticking. I really believe this guy wants to compete for a championship and wants to play for a contender to give him a shot at that. And teams know this, so they're not going to bend to what the Pistons want, especially a contender where like their roster's already set. We're like, look, we're winning. Why would we part ways with any of our guys to bring in Boyan? Yeah, sure, he could help, but we still want to keep the roster that we've been winning with intact and just add him to it. So I really think you could just throw contenders out the window, and you're not going to get a good draft pick from them anyways, unless they're trading another team's draft pick for him. But like I've already said, it is time to move on from him. The Pistons cannot start with him next year and expect him to produce as a 20 points per game scorer. That's a huge gamble. He will be 35 at the beginning of next season. And for you to go into that next season with him still on the roster thinking, okay, this is the year we're going to trade him. We got 2 years out of him. We've won 23 games. That's enough. Let's move on from him. I really think at some point between now and next year, Boyan is just his age is going to get to him. Like he'll still be effective because he's such a good shooter, but some of the things he does to create space, that is going to be lost with the age. I mean, I could be wrong. Who knows? I mean, he definitely could be one of these guys that just plays till he's like 38 at a high level for all I know. I mean, it seems like a lot of basketball players are doing it. But again, that's a huge gamble. And maybe they have something worked off in the offseason where they're gonna move on from him. I just don't know. Nothing this front office does makes any sense. But I do have a Boyan trade for you guys, and this is Boyan to the Houston Rockets. This is probably my favorite trade that I've found with Boyan because even though you're not getting good players back for him, you are getting some draft capital that can be used to make other moves. So the trade is, and this comes from, I want to say, I think it's like All In on Houston or something like that. I could be getting the name wrong. I thought I wrote it down, but apparently I didn't. So the trade is Victor Oladipo, Jock Landale, a 2020 first round pick from Brooklyn, a 2024 second round pick, and the picks are protected 56 through 59 from the Golden State Warriors, and then a 2025 second round draft pick. Like I said, this is out of all of the Boyan trades I have seen, this is my favorite. Just because even though Victor Oladipo's not going to play for the Pistons, like he's still recovering from his injury, and there at this point there's still no return date. There's no timetable for his return. So he's out indefinitely. I don't think he ever puts on a Pistons jersey unless it's for like, I don't know, like a media day if he's still here or something. So I'm not really looking like I'm not excited just because like Victor Oladipo, the name, if he wasn't hurt, yeah, it would be a pretty decent trade, and you probably get one last draft pick for it. But he's just really in there to make the salaries work. So Jock Landale, he's an interesting guy. He's not a great player. Again, he's not gonna move the win column. He's not gonna make your team that much better. He's a backup to the backup. Had a little cup of coffee with the San Antonio Spurs, looked decent, came in as a 26-year-old rookie. Now, the first thing you're going to notice about him is the contract. It's a 4-year, $32 million contract, but only the first year is guaranteed. So year 2, year 3, year 4, it is set for him to make 8 million, but you have an opportunity to cut him before a certain date every year. So essentially, he'd be on like a 1-year deal every single year if the Pistons were to make a trade for him. Now, this is a guy that has played for Monte Williams before, and I believe he started over DeAndre Ayton in the playoffs for like a game or two. He's a good finisher at the rim. He has shown range. He's hit 52 three-pointers in 3 years that he's been in the league, and he's a solid interior defender. Again, doesn't move the needle that much, but a guy that understands defense. He's a guy that could probably give you 9 to 12 minutes per game, and he's not going to be too much of a liability on the floor. But again, when you're looking at this trade, you're not looking at the players that are coming back. You're not looking at like Jock. If you're just looking at the players, you're like, dude, this is kind of disappointing. We're not really getting anything in return. What you have to look at is just all the draft picks, because draft picks, they can help make other moves. That is what it is all about. And that you need as many assets as you can possibly get on this team if you're still trying to protect the core four. That is what you have to do. So even though I do like the trade, I'm not like fully sold on it. I'm more enticed by the draft picks. And again, this just comes from another blogger. I don't think this is an actual trade that could go down. I think they were just having fun. They were on the trade machine and they said, "Hey, this works." But I'm going to tell you right now, out of all of the other trades I've seen, this is probably my favorite. So there is another trade with Bojan's name attached to it, and this one's a little bit more interesting because it comes with a polarizing player. And this is Zach LaVine, the infamous Zach LaVine. So the Bulls are looking to trade him. There has been a rumor that the Bulls are looking at Bojan in one of the core four: Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, or Asar Thompson. At this moment, I would not trade any of the core four for Zach LaVine. And the reason is because the Bulls have been actively shopping him for a while. Like, they just want to dump Zach LaVine. So why would I give up one of my best assets for a guy that I know you are trying to get rid of? This is where it kind of plays in the favor to the Pistons. And I would give a Bojan for him. There was another trade out there that did involve Bojan to the Bulls. I believe it was Marcus Sasser and Isaiah Stewart. That is more of a trade I would lean to doing, because you get to keep the four guys that really are like the players that you've invested in. So those are the four I would keep. If you could trade Isaiah Stewart, Bojan, and Sasser for Zach LaVine, even though his contract, I know a lot of fans don't love it because I think he's about to get paid like 48 million in his final year, but I believe it's up in 2026 and 2027. I don't have it in front of me. I could look. Let me just look this up real quick. So the Zach LaVine contract, I just want to see when it ends. That's all I'm interested in right now. So the Zach LaVine contract, wow, this is going to annoy me. So he signed a 5-year, $215 million contract. I forgot how much money it was for. That's just crazy. So it is up in 2026, 27. It is a player option. He is set to make 48 million. And I believe that is when Duren and Jaden Ivey would be in their first years of their extension. So there would be a lot of money that the Pistons are playing to like four players. That would be Ivey, Duren, if those two are still on the team, if they were to make this trade. LaVine and Cade Cunningham. That's a lot of money just for four guys. But again, LaVine would be in this final year of the deal. Like I've already said, I wouldn't trade one of the core four for Zach LaVine. If I had to, if I was like really in on this trade, I would most likely give up Jaden Ivey for Zach LaVine, because a lot of Pistons fans want Jaden Ivey to produce like Zach LaVine. So I'm thinking like, well, you're already getting the guy that's doing it, and he still is only 28 years old. And basketball players, they have been known to play at a higher level, especially now in today's NBA, at a higher level, at an at an older age. So, I mean, it makes kind of sense if you have to give up one of the core four. You might as well just trade two guard for two guard. But I still think you'd be a lot to give up for Zach LaVine. But as fans, like we can't keep waiting for the perfect player. Like we have to make a move to make this roster more competitive. Even Cade was talking about like more spacing on the floor would keep the turnovers down. Basically, it's basically a cry for help, is what he's saying, and this would help. Like the thing is, fans all the time, they just don't want a player. I see it all the time on social media. They don't want this player, they don't want that player because he has all these weaknesses. There is no perfect player in the NBA. Every player has a weakness to their game. You have to take a chance, especially if you're Detroit, in making this because nobody's coming here. Like in the draft gods have not been they have not shown favor on us. We're not getting a unicorn anytime in the draft. It's just not going to happen. Does not happen for Detroit. So you have to try to gamble and you have to make a move. That is how you get the star players to Detroit. I know some fans are saying like, well, this could be Blake Griffin 2.0. I don't think it's Blake Griffin 2.0 because that team that was broke apart for Blake Griffin was a lot better than this team. This team has 6 wins on the season right now. They're not that Pistons team. That's why I don't think it's Blake Griffin 2.0. And plus, like, some people will point to all the injuries. Yeah, Zach LaVine has had a handful in his career. They've been small. He's had one big injury. It came in his third year when he was averaging 18 points per game for the Minnesota Timberwolves. It actually happened against the Detroit Pistons where he tore his ACL. But that's the one major injury he's had in his career. Other than that, it's been like foot inflammations, shoulder injuries, sprained ankles, stuff like that. Nothing like too major for Zach LaVine. And he's been a two-time All-Star. Like he's been solid for the Bulls. I think trading for Zach LaVine would cause a lot of heads to spin in Detroit because, like I said earlier, many feel like we'd be doing the Blake Griffin trade all over again. I do have some reasons why I wouldn't trade for Zach LaVine. I'll get into them right now. And one of the big reasons is he is viewed as a ball stopper. And I think up until now, like you could definitely call him a ball stopper. He's an isolation player. This is a guy where he thrives in that role as the isolation guy, using the pick and roll, using his athleticism to beat the defender going downhill and meeting him at the rim. He is a very good shooter, but he also loves tough shots. That's something I just dislike about his game. I feel like he puts himself in a position where he has to take these tough jumpers, and now he can hit them. It's just not the type of basketball I really enjoy. And also another reason I wouldn't trade for him is up until this point, his play hasn't led to winning basketball. And I don't really think that's all on Zach LaVine. I think it's always been on the rosters that have been built around him. So the first year he played with Lonzo Ball and DeMar DeRozan and Alex Caruso, they had a winning record. I believe they were 42 and 40. So they were 2 wins over 500 and they made the playoffs, I believe, as an 8 seed where they lost in 5 to the Milwaukee Bucks. So when you put the right players around him, it seems like a scorer like Zach LaVine can help you win basketball games. You just got to have the right guys on the floor with him. And you can say that about many players. The real reason I want to trade for Zach LaVine, though, and I think some fans would agree with me on this, I just don't trust the front office to build around Cade and Zach LaVine properly. I do think the two of them could work together in the backcourt, but the Pistons would yet again be in basketball purgatory because of the front office. Because you would have these two talented players like, okay, we got the two guys, go out there and win us some games. We're not going to do anything else. That's what I think would happen. And that's where I'm more like, okay, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't be looking towards Zach LaVine. But I do like his game. He is an elite scorer. So here are the reasons I would trade for Zach LaVine. Like I just said, he is an elite scorer. This is a guy that for 5 seasons has averaged 24 or more points per game, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. His best season came in 2020-21, where he averaged 27, 5, and 5 with shooting splits of 51, 42, and 85, and now in 42% on 8 3-point attempts per game. He is one of the better scorers in the NBA. You need scoring to win the game. Now, I know I talked about him being kind of a ball stopper and more isolation play. But this year, Billy Donovan for the Bulls, he's been trying to change his offense. He's been trying to get more movement, more ball cuts, more off the ball stuff. And even though Zach Levine's numbers have been down, and I attribute that to some of the injuries, the nagging, the foot inflammation stuff that he has going on. I think that has more of a play to it, but it is showing that he can play off the ball. And he's a pretty good catch and shoot three-point shooter. Not so much this year. I think he's hovering around like 34%. But I went and looked back on like I believe the last 4 seasons, he was shooting 40% on catch and shoot. And I think I had one season he was close to 48% on catch and shoot with I think 2.5, 3 attempts per game. So he would give Cade a nice outlet from the perimeter. And the reason I like Zach LaVine too is it seems like the Pistons are always trying to draw stuff up for Bojan, who's older by about 6 years from Zach LaVine. When the offense stalls and going in those droughts, now you would have a younger, more elite, more explosive scorer for when the offense stalls. That's why I like Zach LaVine. And if you can keep Jaden Ivey and Asar with Cade and Duran and Zach LaVine, I know some fans have said, well, he would stunt the growth of these guys on the team. I disagree with that. I think if Ivy could play along with another basketball player that has some of that elite athleticism like he does, especially with that quick first step, if you could get him to play with a guy and learn from a guy that's has those same tools but has had to learn how to navigate NBA defenses to one get his shot off, I think that would be a huge plus for Jaden Ivey and Asar Thompson. And I want to get back to a little bit about Zach LaVine's game. Yeah, he's not much of a playmaker, but out of the pick and roll, he was very good. Like you can go back and watch the film on him. When him and Vucevic were running that thing, he could put the ball in a place where Vucevic could make another play out of it. And it was a good pass. Now, some of his passes are lazy. Again, he's not really a point guard, but all that gravity, he does create open looks for other players. And on more than one occasion, he has found the open guy. I'm like pretty much talking myself in to Zach LaVine here. And he can play off the ball. I know that he's better with the ball in his hands, but he can still make strong cuts. Again, he knows how to navigate the defense. He knows how to relocate along the perimeter. When I went back and watched some film on him, this was a guy that would make a pass and then he would relocate. He would move. And I think that is again something the Pistons are missing to on this team where they could, put them in the backcourt with Cade Cunningham. And maybe that's just Monty's scheme where he's not asking players to do that. But with Zach LaVine, you're automatically getting it. So I really do think when it comes down to it, it really depends on what Zach LaVine you're getting. Are you getting the guy that thinks, hey, I should be the number one option? The offense should be built around me. If you are, then I'm not trading for him. But if you're getting a guy that's willing to take a secondary role, willing to be an outlet, willing to play more off the ball, willing to drop his usage rates, I think the trade could be beneficial because, again, you're not signing a guy like this in the offseason. You have to make a trade for him. And again, I know his contract doesn't seem like the best for people, but it is up in just a few seasons. It ends in 26 and 2027. It's not that big of a deal. What I don't like when the conversation has been around Zach LaVine and other players like him, you'll hear a lot of fans say, well, he doesn't elevate the player, he doesn't elevate the play around the other of the players around him. Okay. Well, how about we look at it this way? What if you put Zach LaVine in a situation where the players around him elevate his game and make him even a better player? We never seem to talk about that angle, and I'd never really hear it from anybody. But that's something I'm thinking about. What if you actually put him on a team where he has a playmaker like Cade Cunningham, where he's playing with a guy like Jaden Ivey, who they do set up good looks for other players? How would that help Zach LaVine? And then his play in turns elevates their play because he gives them another elite scorer, another elite shot maker. That is why I am for the trade. But again, I gave you some reasons why I'm not for the trade as well. And I don't know. Tell me what you think in the comments about Zach LaVine on the Detroit Pistons. So, like I told you at the top of the podcast, I do have another question from my friend. And let me just say, most Pistons fans, they are not going to like this final topic. And let me just say before I get into it, this is I would not do this. I'm not advocating for the Pistons to do this. So the question was, should the Pistons trade Cade Cunningham? And I'm looking at it this way. The Pistons are essentially in year 1 of their rebuild because every season since they drafted Cade has been worse than the one before. And if you're not building on any type of success, your rebuild to me automatically restarts every offseason. So we're essentially in year 1 of the rebuild. Cade is coming up on his rookie extension, which we all know he's going to sign. I doubt he's the first rookie that ask out. But my biggest fear is that Cade Cunningham is going to be on the Pistons, putting up all-star like numbers on a bad team, won't have any success, won't get a taste of the playoffs with the Pistons. And when his rookie contract is, I mean, when his first extension is coming up, he's going to ask to be out. I don't want to see Cade and really any of the young guys on this team if they're not going to win. I don't want to watch Cade for the next 5 or 6 years and it just be disaster and disappointment after disaster and after disappointment. I don't want to see that. I don't think any fan does. And I don't want to see him ask out when he's 28 years old and then go to a better team where he gets to show out in the playoffs. And I think that really is potentially his time in Detroit, unless they really do figure things out starting with this offseason. But again, I don't trust this front office to do it. So instead of waiting until Cade is 28, even though when you can trade him when teams know he's going to want out, where his value might dip because they're going to have so much more film on him, you could make the case for why you would trade him now because there's still so much mystery around his game. Like, is he a first option? Is he a franchise player? Is he a third option? Is he that connector on a really good team? Whatever questions you have about him, that mystery is still out on Cade Cunningham, where his value would probably still be highest right now. That is it's crazy to me that we're even already talking about this because it's essentially only his 3rd year in the league, and we're already talking like, are the Pistons better without him? Should they trade him? Should they, look elsewhere? Should they try to get max value for him? I don't know, but those are my reasons for it is you're in year 1 of the rebuild. He's going to be on the Pistons team after he signs that extension for 4, 5, 6 years on losing team after losing team after losing team. And then eventually he's probably most likely going to demand a trade because that's what good players do for greener grass and some other franchise. And then he's going to finally get the success that he wants. And we're going to be sitting at home, not watching the Pistons in the playoffs, watching whatever team he's on, probably make it to like the 2nd or even 3rd round on his first playoff run. And it's going to be amazing. So there's been a lot of talk on social media whether the Pistons are better with or without Cade Cunningham. So here's some numbers. The record with Cade is 3-33 this season. Without him, it's 2-6. I think it's actually 3-6 now. I don't think that part was updated. So the points per game with Cade is 111. Without him, it's 116. Rebounds per game with and without is 43. Assists per game is 25, 26 if you round up with Cade. And without Cade, it's 29. Turnovers per game, this is kind of interesting. With Cade, it's around 15, 16 if you're rounding up. And without him, it's 12.6 or 13. Field goals made and their percentages, 41 and then 46.8%. And then without him, they're making 43 or 44 shots at 49%. I'm actually kind of surprised. I thought that was actually lower when I put that in. But either way, Cade is generating some offense, but it looks like the offense is better. I mean, you can tell just by the points per game, it's better without Cade. And then the three-pointers made in percentage is 10 at 34, and without him, it's 13 and 39. So really, what is the reason why the Pistons are better without Cade? I really just think it comes down to what Monte is putting out on the floor and what type of offense he's trying to run. I feel like when Cade's on the floor, and I'm not the only one that thinks this, they just keep trying to run this heliocentric offense like he's Luka Doncic. And when he's not on the floor, they're playing more free with a little bit more movement. They got to figure out how to play with more movement with Cade on the floor. That's just what they have to do. I personally would love to see it when Cade and Jaden Ivey on the floor. I was just talking to someone about this, that if the Pistons were trying to push it, they would put the ball in Jaden Ivey's hands and let him run the transition offense and just try to attack the rim. And then if like you can't get any buckets in transition, that's when you go to the half court stuff and you give it back to Cade and let him do his thing. That's a great way where I think you could figure out how to use both these players on the team and then also combined what you're doing without him and what you're doing with him. But again, that's Monty's job. It's not mine. I'm actually surprised that the numbers are better without Cade, but then again, I'm also not just because I've watched every single one of these games and the offense does seem to stagnate with Cade. It's almost like everybody's just waiting around for him to create something versus just moving and creating offense for themselves. But again, that's Monty's job. Hopefully he figures out before, it gets too bad in Detroit, even though we are only on 6 wins this season, which we did get another W last night. That was incredible. But anyways, that is the podcast. I want to thank you guys for listening. I do appreciate it. So thank you guys for listening to the 3 Championship Drive podcast. Do me a favor, go to Google, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe. After you subscribe, leave a review, drop a rating, vote, or polls, and more importantly, tell a Pistons fan.